Hello everyone, and welcome to this video portion about installation. So to simplify things, the first thing that we're going to do is just rename our 2.90 folder to 2.90A, which will basically disassociate it completely with what you see going on here. So we'll just close this out, doesn't matter. And from here, we are just going to load the latest 2.90 from the Blender launcher. And of course, it's going to load up as if it's never had any preferences. So basically, we've created a vanilla setup very quickly. So left click, search, save new settings, and we'll go under edit preferences and add-ons and choose install. And for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm actually going to install from a different version than the one that we're using. So we're going to install the last version of BoxCutter and enable it. And we'll install the latest version of HardOps, which is X_18. And we'll wait a moment for our flagships to show up. And now that they're both enabled, we are basically good to go. Of course, I'll be jumping out of this ASAP because I'm not going to go through all this configuration again. But basically now we have BoxCutter and HardOps installed. And as you can see, I have 716_15. So let's say that you were a user and you were just casually using BoxCutter, and you realize that it's update time and you would like to update to the latest version. I would like to actually walk through this process with you, pretending to be a customer and all. So let's say that we exited the active tool and we pressed F4 and we went to our preferences and we just chose to install. Let's just choose to install the latest version. We're just willy-nilly, not really thinking about it. Let's just install it. And it looks like it just replaced it with the latest version. So the easiest way to find out is to go under BoxCutter and just look through some of our options, and we see that it's not actually the latest version because I can tell you that there's some additional options under Incon now and we're just not seeing them here. So what this means is that we probably want to go under our preferences and save our preferences, and under our file we want to save our startup file. But because of me having two ultra wide vertical monitors on top of each other, I actually have to lower my Blender down to like the basement and then save startup file. And then whenever I close it, it's going to give me a prompt because I didn't configure my prefs, but the next time I open it, it'll at least open on the right monitor. So, don't ask me why, it's just a thing. But we're just going to shift snap this into place. And we see that even though we've upgraded to the latest version from the old version without even replacing the directory or anything, we were able to smoothly transition by just closing, sorry about that, by just closing and opening Blender. So I just wanted to walk through that process just to make sure that things just aren't out of control there. So the next thing I want to talk about is, basically Blender being clockwork and not rocket science, because I get a lot of support emails about people struggling with the fundamentals of installation. So let's just close Blender. And in my case, I'm going to use Blender from the Blender launcher. I actually have the daily builds in addition to being able to go over here and download the latest, which there are none because I'm always up to date. So I could be testing 2.91, which we also currently work with, which I'll be showing throughout this BoxCutter content. But let's just go to the latest 2.90, which is the current version. And we're just going to load it up again. And we see that, we already saved our prefs with BoxCutter loaded. So we're pretty much good to go. But one of the things that people always ask about is how do you install things manually? And so let's just close this as if we don't need it. We can bring this over off to the side. And on Windows, the only OS I can really talk about as a person of experience is if you hold down Windows and press R, you can bring up your run window. And I like to type in %appdata%. And there's more you can add to it, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. And once you do that, you get taken to your roaming. So when you get taken here, there's a folder called Blender Foundation, and inside of there is Blender. And then there's these folders that get created the moment you start using Blender. So me personally, I actually use a lot of symbolic links, which I want to do a video talking about because, all this installation stuff is kind of crazy and I don't deal with it like you guys do, but I should probably show y'all how I do deal with it. But you know, whenever it comes to your installation, we're talking about 2.9 here. So under scripts and add-ons, because we installed from file, this folder exists, and because we installed from file, these two add-ons are here. So installation really is as easy as us, you know, we could just delete these and remove them, right? And that means that if we were to load up Blender 2.9, sorry, you can of course skip past this part or this video if you're not wanting to hear about this, but now we're able to load up Blender and we see that neither add-on is there, and it gave us a little error in the corner. So let's say that we were just trying to deal with the installation of this. So I could of course just bring up another file window, and this time we just jump over to our tools, and let's say that we opened up the zip file of this installation. So I'm just going to drag over BoxCutter from the zip file, and we'll do the same thing with HardOps. We can just double click it and drag it over into this add-on location. So now we have these add-ons installed. So if we were to close and open up Blender again, we're now good to go once again. And that's really how easy it is to just quickly get in there and start updating your add-ons either manually or using install from file. We see, you know, through these tests alone that it's becoming more versatile, and because the add-ons are now present, it loads up exactly as you left off with your preferences. So the next thing I do want to discuss with you is your preferences themselves. So me personally, the config folder is who you are. It keeps up with your startup scene, your user preferences, and your bookmarks, as you can see here. So I'm the type of person who will right click this and just send it to a compressed folder. And by basically deleting this config folder, we've nuked our Blender install. It has no memory of who we are because that config folder is who Blender was. And if you're wondering why I'm going into depth on this, is because I want a video out there where if you watch it, you have a full understanding of your Blender configuration and where our scope ends and begins with things. Because, you know, once you start configuring things to your own will, it is something that is on you, the user, because, you know, I pretty much try to keep up with only vanilla. However, you know, we will just go to left click, search, save new settings, and keep in mind, all we deleted was config. We didn't delete our add-on. So I'm just going to snap this into form, and we will just bring up our preferences, and under add-ons, we'll locate BoxCutter, and we'll locate HardOps, and click the X, and here we are basically good to go from a completely neutral installation. But let's say that I love that config. Let's say that config was me. And keep in mind, I backed up my config before I even did any of this content because I don't play around. So I'm going to right click this. I'm just going to extract it to here, which will restore my config folder. And what this means is that when I launch it, I'm using the config that we basically created a moment ago that has this cut cube in here and already had BoxCutter enabled. And that's basically how easy it is to control your Blender. And so sometimes I hear people say things like, man, I'm gonna delete my installation. I'm like, what does that mean? You know, and it's because when you go to the Blender site, they gave you an MSI file, which is weird. When I started out, they didn't do that, but that's just life. So let's say I wanted to just get rid of my 2.91 folder. I'm just gonna put an A on it because I'm gonna come back to these. I do care about my installations. And I'm just gonna right click this, and we're gonna choose to, let's see, where is it? Geez, every option except for the option I'm looking for. Never mind. So we're just gonna Control C and we'll Control V. Usually I have an option that lets me pick a link location and then also paste it, which I would have just made a relative link to this one, but we'll just talk about that another time. And we're just gonna rename this to 2.91. So keep in mind, I just made a 2.91 based off of this one, using the same configuration, same add-ons. And so we're just gonna go to daily builds and we're just gonna pop this baby open. And of course it's gonna pop open looking a lot like the other Blender we were just looking at. So with our work, our goal is always to remain compatible with the current and the latest. So, you know, whenever people write me emails about it, I'm like, come on, when have we ever not been compatible with the latest version or whatever version everyone's talking about? Because there's so many people invested in this product and its success that, you know, we just can't afford to let such things happen. So here we are in Blender 2.91, and really the only difference to point out here is that in this version, There's an additional option for exact and fast that you can jump between if you want to experiment with the new Boolean algorithm that's present in this that allows for more precise Boolean. So we'll be talking about that more in depth later, but I just wanted to show how versatile it is to get your installation between these two locations, and really that your installation is comprised of this configuration folder, which is you as a person, and scripts, which is, your add-on. So when people say things like, I'm going to uninstall, I'm puzzled. I'm like, what does that mean? What are you uninstalling? I'm not trying to be condescending or anything. I just, Blender is rather basic. And so I feel that at least having this sort of baseline understanding, hopefully we can kind of come to understanding as far as how Blender should work and how you can troubleshoot your own installation whenever things don't work. So I've basically rolled through this process in the longest way possible to really just drag it out and make it just as terrible as possible. And here I am just deleting these folders I created for the purposes of this demonstration. And I'm just removing the A, which basically restores me to where I was before I started. Sometimes you can see I actually go pretty deep in my demonstrations. It's rather rare for someone to talk me into doing a whole new installation video to cover a problem, but now we're back in my neutral installation where Blender's just ready to rock and roll. So really that's installation for you in a nutshell, and how easy it can be for you to jump between your configurations, even on the same computer within the same version of Blender, and even with multiple versions of Blender. So with that, we can now jump on to the next section that's talking about actual box cutter itself.